My name is Terrence Park. This is an attempt to get my story out there so my friends and family can know where I've gone, and anyone else who reads it can avoid my mistake, I guess. Before I was trapped here, I was big into urban exploration. I loved finding and exploring abandoned places. Something about that odd, beautiful feeling of finding something that's been abandoned and thinking about what it might have been like when it was still in use. Naturally, I liked going out alone. The whole experience was just better alone. Easier to enjoy an abandoned place if there weren't other people walking around making noise. The last trip I took, the last time I saw another living human being, was with several friends. At first, I thought it was just going to be one person, a friend of mine, tagging along, but as these things go, it snowballed into a fairly large group. Friends of friends and such, you know how these things go. People invite others. Before you know it, you've got a large, noisy group on your quiet getaway. Anyway, we got to the place, some sort of factory office building place. Kind of a weird design, but that's part of the charm of these places. Anyway, we explored a while as a group. They were all cutting up, being loud and obnoxious. Pretty quick, I got fed up with their nonsense. I waited until they were all in the middle of some shenanigans and snuck off. I figured I could check out the offices while they were fooling around in the factory section. The office was fairly standard cubicles, some signs of animals, probably raccoons, and everything was covered in layers of dust. It was pretty cool. Exactly the type of place I like to explore. I wandered around aimlessly, taking the occasional artistic picture for my Instagram. Mainly, though, I just enjoyed the solitude. I didn't have long to enjoy it. The rest of them soon came stomping in, calling my name, trying to find out where I got off to. I picked up my pace, thought maybe I could find a quiet spot to squeeze in just a few more minutes of solitude. I turned down a random hallway that led to a surprisingly clean-looking break room. No signs of age or dust or anything. There were even clean dishes in the drying rack next to the sink. The only sign that anything was out of place was this door, covered in what looked like soot or maybe char marks. I didn't have much time to really look around. While I was still trying to make sense of this strange room, I heard someone calling down the hallway. I acted on impulse. Not even impulse, really. It was a habit. I rushed through the door, that damned door. It led to a room that looked exactly like the one I had left. Only there, I couldn't hear anyone stomping around or calling out. Figured it must have been a thick door and kept on exploring. Figured they'd catch up sooner than I'd like anyway. Only, in this new section, everything seemed to be identical to where I had come from. It was like I had circled back on myself. But that was impossible. I was sure I would have noticed, and if I had gotten turned around, where was everybody else? At first, I just told myself the layout was the same, and that was all. But as I kept walking around, I recognized several spots that I had photographed before. That was when I decided to go back to the door and try to piece together what was going on. When I got back to the door, or where the door should have been, there was no door. Just an ordinary wall. A bit unnerving, but I kept my cool. I decided to just walk around until I found the rest of the group. I rambled around for almost an hour looking for them without finding anything, which I would normally have been pleased with, but I felt uneasy at the time. I thought I had somehow lost my bearings completely, and I was starting to worry something was wrong with me. I even started calling out their names, shattering the blasted silence I cared about so much. I got no responses, and that point is when I first started to panic. I pulled out my phone to try to call them and noticed I had already missed several of their calls. I tried to call them back, but all I got was that stupid little tone in the standard "this number is unavailable" message. I tried to text them. Sometimes that'll go through even when calls won't, but it gave the failed to send error. I went out to the cars to wait for them there. I got a few more calls and texts while waiting, but whenever I tried to answer, the The calls always dropped before I went through, and the texts always refused to send. I had driven separately, so after a bit I decided to drive towards town to see if I could get better reception. Testing my phone as I went, I started to think maybe it was my phone, not the signal. I ended up driving all the way into town to see if I could find a phone to borrow. I stopped at the library, figured they'd have a phone, and they did. But what they didn't have were any staff or patrons. There were cars in the parking lot, the lights were on, but the place was completely abandoned. Even the turtle they kept in a tank by the front desk was gone. Their phone didn't work any better than mine did. At that point, I was more or less having a full-on panic attack. I went out and collapsed on the lawn, hyperventilating. When I came out of it, I noticed that I had been rolling in an anthill. I jumped up and tried to get the ants that I expected to be all over me off, but there weren't any ants. I looked down, and where you'd expect a bunch of busy ants trying to rebuild their anthill, no activity, no signs of life. I kicked over another nearby anthill, but saw the same thing. Again, no ants. That's when I first noticed the silence. No crickets, birds, cards, no nothing. After that, I drove around in my car trying to find anyone, but no one was around. I drove to the nearest pet store. It was empty too. No staff, no customers, no animals. I guess that kind of seems obvious by now, but I mention it because afterwards I walked along the rundown strip mall and saw that same scorched door through one of the shop windows. It was just standing freely in the middle of the shop. I dashed to the entrance, but in doing so, lost sight of the door, and while I wasn't looking, it disappeared, I guess. I still see that door regularly. Always somewhere I can't quite get to without losing sight of it, and it always disappears as soon as I look away. Whatever it is, it seems to be taunting me. That's how I got here. I've been here for well over a year at this point. Just me in this empty, abandoned world. Every once in a while, I'll think I'll hear someone calling my name, but there's never anyone there. Maybe it's just in my head, or who knows? Maybe it's the door taunting me. Tried everything I can think of, but no matter where I look, there's no one. No animals, no people. Just me and the solitude. I can access the internet. I even watched the missing persons search for me unfold and its eventual empty-handed conclusion. They put up a good search, though. I probably shouldn't have been such a jerk to those guys. Anyway, I can access the internet, but whenever I try to post something, I just get an error. Decided to write up this account and try to post it over and over again. If you're reading this, I guess eventually it worked, or more accurately, whatever brought me here, and the lights in my loneliness let it go through. Maybe just to raise my hopes a little, so we can watch them fade away again. The irony of the situation isn't lost on me. I've seen enough Twilight Zone episodes to know when I've been got. And I've been got. If any of you guys see this, I just want to say I'm sorry. I thought I wanted peace and quiet, but I'd give anything to hear y'all break it again. Disturb the tranquility of this abandoned place.